Good evening, all of you, and thank you for coming. When preparing to make this speech and to come here, I took a good hard look at the history of Catholic education in the Lewiston-Auburn area. And I think the best way to understand it is to go through somewhat of a litany of what happened with our schools over the years since it's been founded. The first school built was St. Joseph's School in 1881. The second one was St. Louis in 1892. The third school built was Healy's Asylum for Boys, also in 1892. Then came St. Patrick's School in 1905. St. Mary's School in 1916, followed by Holy Family School in 1923. St. Peter's School came the year after, in 1924, Holy Cross in 1927, Our Lady of the Rosary, 1928, St. Joseph's Orphanage for Girls, the same year, 1928, Ave Maria Academy in 1929, St. Bernadette in 1931, St. Dominic High School, the only high school, in 1941, and the last school was built in 1952, Sacred Heart. When you look at this list, you notice that all those schools no longer exist as independent schools. St. Dominic's is a survivor, but it has to be more than that. It's not so much a survivor as the successor of all those who went before. In fact, for 138 years, the Catholic faith has been taught in the schools in our area. And it has not disappeared, but it's been transformed into what we see now, which is St. Dominic Academy, which is in many ways an alternative to the public school system. In many ways, what we are is more like a school system than a single school. We have two campuses which straddle the river, which show that we actually are, cover an area much like that. A little bit more about that later on, I think. Father Druin, the founder of the school, began in 1941 trying to bring education to the boys in Lewiston who had started to go to high school. The dream quickly expanded to girls, and the high school, as we know, was founded at about that time. The Catholic education from 1941 grew for about 20 years and then started a slow decline. And if you look at these schools that I listed, most of them ended up closing in the late 60s, early 70s. Because where Catholic education reached its peaks in the 1950s, and then quickly it tailored off. It takes a more somber note in the 1990s, and additionally, St. Dom's itself, in a treasured old building which many of you have fond memories of. The kind of fond memories you have about the floors that weren't even, and the roof that leaked at just certain times of the year, and the area of the building you did not want to go to in the winter, right? And the area of the building you did not want to be in the warmer months, all those pieces. They all ended up to a building that, in fact, by the early 1990s was approaching unsuitability for habitation. It had to be fixed, and the cost was too much. It was deemed too much for the age. And due to the faith and generosity of donors, a new campus was found across the river in Auburn. The only Catholic school to be built in Auburn is St. Dom's, to my knowledge. I could be wrong, so I won't. But we got here, and in 2002, in the middle of the winter, which I have to admit, when I found that out, I was amazed, because nothing like moving a school in the middle of a school year, in the middle of a winter, but it was done. In 2002, the campus was opened, and it brought new life to the school, as these things often do. The school thrived in the new location, and by 2010, it became St. Dominic Academy, integrating all the grades. By 2015, the school was growing, and so the 7th and 8th grade was moved out of the Lewiston campus over to the high school because the academy hits its peak in 2015-16 with 604 students. During the time period from 2011 until this year, the high school has been slowly declining in enrollment, whereas the grammar school has gone up and down. As of today, the total academy's enrollment is 434, and it puts the school, quite frankly, in a challenging position where it has to find a way to grow into the future. So how do we find ourselves in this position? How do we go from a position in which the majority of children in the Lewiston-Auburn area went to Catholic schools, and now 9% do? It's a considerable change. The thing about it, though, is that it's not a dramatic change like a fire is a dramatic change. It's more like a flood, not a flood, like a drought, the opposite of a flood. It's more like a drought, and it's really hard to say, when does a drought begin? Think about that. Does it begin on that winter where there just wasn't that much snow and so it was easy to get around? Did it begin in the spring that was so delightful? Does it begin in the summer where it was sunny on your birthday? But suddenly you realize the pond is low, the river's not flowing very well, and you're running into, if you've ever farmed, running into an issue trying to keep everything alive. It's at the point when you realize it often that you go back and say, gosh, if I had realized it earlier, but you don't. And it makes the situation, while hard, fixable. Not impossible, but challenging. But after all in life, do we not want a challenge? But let me take a little understanding before we get into this. Let me back up a little bit, because I think it's important to understand what goes on in a school and really the three parts of our schools to understand what we're doing. You know, St. Dom's educates from pre-K to 12, from little tiny kids to great big ones, right? Little problems, big problems. Blessings. Did I say problems? I'm sorry, blessings. So, but you know, let's take a look, and if we can remember in our mind's eye what it was like when we were 4 or 5 and went to our first class. Think about, if you can, your kindergarten teacher or your first grade teacher. It's a surprising fact that most people can remember those teachers distinctly. Right? We can almost close our eyes and see them. I can see Sister Frances. Right? She seemed to be maybe about 1,000 years old when I had her, but full of life, you know. But I can remember her, and what I remember about Sister Frances was kindness and love and charity, and she just made me feel good. Well, when you look at the Lewiston campus, at the Holy Cross campus, that's what you see in there. You see kids who are loved, kids who are embraced, who are shown the truth, and who learn their letters. Just before I came over here, my first grader was reading her first book to me. She only got a few of the words wrong. It's pretty good. So, but what you see is, most of us remember the women who taught us, and a few men, were filled with love and kindness. They made learning to read, write, basic math, and knowledge fun and exciting. They encouraged us when we were down, rejoiced with us when we were happy, and brought smiles to our frowny faces. You know, the heart of a school are its people. And in the Lewiston campus, really on the Holy Cross campus, we have a treasure because the people there are amazing. And you see this in the looks of the kids' faces. It is a great deal of joy to go and watch them as they traipse off to Mass on Tuesday morning when I normally get over there. As they come down the stairs and greet you as you walk into the church with you. Thank you for coming to our Mass. Thank you for coming to our Mass. But this is the kind of thing we want for our children. We want them to have this because at the youngest age, life is viewed from a viewpoint of emotion. And the emotion of being felt safe and secure, then they can learn the truth. And it's there we can start fulfilling the mission for which the school exists. Well, the kids don't stay little forever, and they grow. And by the time they hit to middle school, they move over to the Auburn campus. So the middle school shares the same building with the high school, although they keep different schedules and different times. And so their interaction is not terribly often. But what happens when you come into middle school, you're changing. And in middle school, there's a portion of your brain which starts looking at life experientially. You're still very much looking at life kind of in this emotional piece where you need to feel secure and safe. But you tend to also run around a lot and need to run around a lot, much more than high school students. And so what happens here in the middle school is the kids come and they get increasingly challenging subjects, more specialized instruction, not to the level of high school, but getting close, where they get math and science, history, English, theology, and arts. They need time to socialize in an energetic fashion, so what do? We send them outside to run around, throw balls around, and have some fun. And what you have, by the way, are the most amazingly dedicated people who teach in the middle school. I was a teacher for a long time in my life before I became an administrator, and only 1 year did I have to teach a middle school class. The middle school teachers have my undying admiration. Because they have to show the same kind of love, the selfless desire for the good of another, to their students as the other grades, but they have to also kind of let the lion out of the cage a little bit. They have to let the kids move around and explore life. And it's a very exciting time, and it's a very, very demanding job. So kudos to them. Our middle school educators shepherd our amazing children, and their good work shines every day. Well, high school then comes, because the third stage in our kind of the primary stages of education. I know it's the secondary parties. What happens there? Well, a high school student sits primarily in this experiential camp, which is why if we think back to our high school years, we tend to remember not the classroom. We tend to remember what happens outside the classroom. We remember the sports, the social times, sitting at lunch, the things we did, the camaraderie we built with our friends. It's in those years strong friendships are formed, and you see them being formed. It's there that you start to experience life and start making order of what happens. The best learning occurs when students are full actors in what they do. Therefore, we have to give specialized instruction in the high school far beyond the level of the lower grades. You need to hire more highly trained staff who are more narrowly trained in their subject areas, and you have to find really the best ones there. It is in the classroom, in the ball field, on the stage, during retreats, and before Almighty God that these children mature to becoming young men and women. Science has showed us that, in fact, if we want to see our kids to be successful, we want to let them mature through these stages, that they have to have experiences and they eagerly seek them. And the key part is that they are good, high-quality experiences. The experiences of playing sports, when you have a good coach and it works well, even if you don't win, is an enormously maturing aspect of your life. The experience of a class which challenges you and causes you to push beyond what you are accustomed to going is an enormously maturing aspect. It helps build them into being the adults we are. Many of our habits were developed in high school. Some habits we worked years to get rid of. But many of our habits, and so because of that, you want something in here very special. The entirety of pre-K through 12, the experience is to prepare students for college, sure enough, right? For work, for their vacation, and for their life beyond that. St. Irenaeus once famously said, "The glory of God is man fully alive in Christ Jesus." You see, a place that teaches that truth is a place that can be rightly considered a school. St. Dom's preaches that truth, that our students are fully alive in Christ Jesus. That God didn't raise Jesus to be a zombie, but Jesus rose because he was God and fully alive. And that is what we want for our children and for as many children as we can, because it is all the difference in the world. Jesus Christ alone is the answer. He's the way, the truth, and the life. The gift of education must be worthy of him who it honors. We in this school spread the gospel through education, and that education, therefore, must be the best possible. For those who aren't Christians and they come and look at this school, they should know that that's our core basic understanding. That we are going to provide the best quality education for your child because we know we stand before them in many ways like the priest does in the person of Christ. We bring the gospel to them. So we have to do a good job. We only get one shot at it. One of the importances, and not to be overlooked about this education, is that no one grows up twice. We only grow up once. We only have one shot at being taught for the first time about the love of God. So that's what St. Dom's is and has been, what it offers today. But what of the future? St. Dom's has been beset with the last bunch of years with many families leaving the school. And it's worth in this speech to take a few moments to take a look at that. There's three basic reasons that I can see that somebody will leave a school after they've come. There's a change in economics, there's bad experiences, or what you might call a bad fit. Let's go through them real quickly. Certainly helping families is a primary goal, financially is a primary goal of financial aid that we offer here and how we work this place. But sometimes there's not much the school can do in that regard. Sometimes job changes cause people to move, all those sorts of pieces. The other two, however, I think we can do something about. Bad experiences, they cannot be fully avoided. Everyone knows that if you want to be safe from having a bad experience, you cannot get out of bed, right? The second you set foot on the floor or walk out the door or interact with somebody, the potential for good or bad exists. So we can't avoid them, but we can improve our responses to them. And while many of you, well, except for my wife, no one here knows me for very long, I can pledge to you that our response to every interaction, we will respond with the principles of justice, honor, and mercy. We will work on it as best as we can. C.S. Lewis has a wonderful little story. He said it a couple times in his writing. He says, every time you meet a person, he says you've never met a mere mortal. Every person you've ever met is immortal. And someday they will be so glorious that if you could see them now, what they will look like, you would be tempted to kneel down and worship. Or so horrible and in such misery that in your worst nightmare you couldn't imagine it. And every time you interact with them, you push them to one extreme or the other. It's a sobering thought. In the school, we push them toward the better side. We make sure, we want them to end up so glorious and in the Father's throne room, because that's the goal of this place. That's why we have to make sure we take care of these issues well and work out these experiences as best we can. And that's why justice has to come along with honor and mercy. The final piece is bad fit. And bad fit is an expectations piece, meaning you thought you were getting something and you didn't get it. You know, the only way you can fix that is by more clearly telling everybody what they're getting. To be more honest, be more direct in how we say it. And to precisely advertise who we are so that when someone comes here, you know exactly what you're getting. It's one of the reasons why we don't run away from our faith, that we have crosses on our walls, we have pictures of saints on our walls, that we go to Mass and we start our days with prayer, because that is who we are. We shouldn't have anybody come into this school and be surprised that we pray, or besides that we're Catholic. That's part of who we are. It means, however, that it causes us to view each one of these kids as God's child, as God's son or daughter, to whom we have to give an account. So we treat them specially and expect them to act that way. But we're going to do some other steps. We're going to introduce placement tests for all coming freshmen. This includes those in our 8th grade. The high school placement test is a test we're going to administer to everybody who wants to come in as freshmen, so that we can better place them in classes and we can use some solid data in order to move them in that area. We are going to make sure when we look at all the other pieces for this, that is done in an orderly and clear fashion. When we make decisions, we're going to make sure they are as clearly stated as possible. What we promise as an administration, we will deliver. Christ said, "Let your yes be yes and your no be no." Therefore, that is what we will do. And in turn, everyone who comes here is going to be held to a high standard. Everyone who comes here, everyone who graduates from St. Dom's, should be known as someone willing to set the earth on fire. Not as an arsonist, just so we're clear. But we want them filled with the fire of the Holy Spirit like at Pentecost. We want them filled with wisdom, understanding, counsel, fortitude, knowledge, piety, and fear of the Lord. It takes a while to do that. About 13, 14 years. But that's what we want these kids to leave with. St. Ignatius said, "If you give me 100 men," I hope it's St. Ignatius, "who love only God and fear only sin, I will change the world." Think about what that we could do with our students. As I said, and Christ said, "Where a man's treasure is, so lies his heart." We all know that, and for all of us, to a large degree, our hearts are in the lives of our children. And when they are brought here, this irreplaceable child has to be loved with the same firmness that God loves us, with the same charity, because that's the kind of way a child grows to be secure, mature, and a full member of our society. The school can help heal many wounds. It cannot help heal all wounds. It has its limitations. And it has to be mindful of that in this process. Currently, due to the work of a very stellar staff, we have been able to offer very quality education at the grammar, middle, and upper school levels. 100% of last year's class gained acceptance to college. This is not the first time it's happened. But the fact is, this is not sustainable at current levels, because you cannot build a system on overworked people, even if they themselves are nearly superhuman. So we need to look at other ways to grow our school. We need to look at tuition. We need to look at our tuition model, and that is going to be one of the things that the board's going to be looking at over the next year. How can we better fund the school to make it more affordable for those people who come in, so that when you look, putting your kid in pre-K, you're not thinking at this endless series of bills, but rather see it as what it is, which is an investment. We need to look at our course offerings. We need to improve what we have and look at when we can offer more. We need to continually train our teachers and pray. We need to pray that God's will is clear, they are ready to move as He calls, and that we are delivered from fear. As Jesus also taught us, fear is useless. What is needed is faith. If this school is as critical as I believe it is, if coming here improves the chance that someday you will see God face to face, then if St. Dom's is the education that's the difference between success and failure, why would we not want to get as many as possible into our school? So who is going to do this? It's a nice little goal, right? Who's going to do this? We have a long history of people who have supported us. From our bishop, who has supported us in every conceivable way for many years, to our donors, to our parents, to our alumni. But who is responsible for solving this little riddle, this little puzzle? We are. All of us. You see, it's not just me who's going to solve this problem, or the board that's going to solve this problem, or the staff that are going to solve this problem, or the students, or the parents. It's going to be all of us together, working together, who will solve this problem. You know, there's no busload of nuns that's going to show up and restack our school, right? They come in Androscoggin, there's no like barge filled with monks. Like, it's not going to happen. The situation doesn't work. And it makes it a very challenging situation. But I want you to consider something. That God knew how challenging this situation was. He knew how important it is to keep this school open and keep Catholic education here in the LA area. He knew how tricky it would be and how he needed just the best people to do it. And he found the best people. He found us. If you think it's not your job and that you can't do this, I would humbly ask you to reconsider. This is our success. This is our job, and this is the one God gave to us, and he gave us the means to do it. So, what are some practical steps we can take? A little story. I was a history teacher besides being a chemistry teacher, so I can't help but tell you a little story. George Washington Goethals was asked by Teddy Roosevelt to build the Panama Canal. He took over from France's Ferdinand Lesseps project, and he famously walked into the chief engineer's office and made the following statement. When I come here, I expect you to be doing something. If it's good, I will praise it. If it's wrong, we will fix it. The only thing I can do nothing with is nothing. Likewise, we will ensure our instruction stays strong by examining what goes on, by observing our teachers in a systematic fashion, by working with them to make sure that they do their jobs better. We will look at our schedules, our course of offerings to make sure they are optimal and continually work with them. The piece we have to remember in life is that if this school looks nothing like it did when you went here, that is to be expected, because neither do we. Everything in life changes, and the only thing that is constant is this change. And our job is to manage that change so that it works to our benefit. It's like the difference between a cultivated field and a field that's just gone wild. A cultivated field is growing, so is the wild field. But I can harvest the cultivated field. I can't the wild field. A couple other pieces. Communication is a perpetual problem in society, and St. Dom's is no exception. But we are making we're going to make some strides. We've actually been developing over the last while a new app, a St. Dom's app, which if I had my cell phone with me, which I didn't, I left it wisely on my desk, I would hold up to you and show you the St. Dom's app. But you can actually get all the communications you pretty much need from the calendar, the newsletter, the food menu, athletics, and much more by going onto that. So that's going to be one of the pieces we do. We're going to work very hard at increasing and improving the morale of the school. Morale is from the root moral and applies the life of the school. The life of our students and faculty is underlined by clear faiths and beliefs which translate to behaviors that are good and true. So John Paul II had a wonderful phrase. He said, your actions both reveal and determine who you are. So I can claim to be patient, but if I act impatiently, I'm not. I can claim to be peaceful, but if I act without peace, I'm not. On the flip side, If I act peacefully, I become peaceful. If I act in order, I become orderly. St. Thomas called these natural graces. We want to build in our kids these natural graces by restoring and reinforcing discipline, by encouraging personal growth, and improving our internal communication, student to student, teacher to student, in other words, speaking with respect to each other, that sort of thing, by insisting upon it. What happens is the school becomes a more orderly, peaceful place, and therefore a place more fun to be in. And it's working. We also want to increase the rigor of our school. Now, rigor defines a Catholic school. Either a task is accomplished or it is not. Clear expectations are given, and they are trained to the students from an early age so it becomes a lifelong habit. We are in process of increasing the rigor in the school, and please note, this is not increasing the workload. This is improving the workload to increasing the effectiveness. Another thing we should realize, like in life, you can only get so bad, but you can keep getting better. You can keep getting higher. Eventually, if you go down, you hit the ground. But if you go up, you can keep getting higher. We can continue, like morale, continues to increase and can continue to increase forever because there is no limit to how good it can be. But the basic frameworks of it is order. Catholic schools need to be awash in art, and in this area we intend to do some serious growing. Both the practical and performing art. Art, beauty, attracts, edifies, and changes the beholder and the artist. When you are taught to appreciate art, and you can see what it is, it can change who you are, and it changes the culture of a building. The difference we see when we walk into, a museum that's filled with beautiful art, as opposed to walking into a McDonald's. I'm trying to think of a bigger contrast, but I couldn't come up with one. But we're serious about Christianity, by the way, and this is, by the way, one of the ways we differ from our contemporaries. Christianity has 2,000 years of art, more than that, because we also have the beforehand. Every art that was created on this planet for all intents and purposes that we come in contact with is Christian art. It is this incredible amount of the most amazingly varied and beautiful work. We need to bring that to our kids because they won't see it. And I think about this, and by the experiences, and I should say about this art. When I was a kid, I thought McDonald's hamburgers were the greatest food ever made. I had what you called an unrefined palate. As I've grown older, I found that they are not, in fact, the greatest food God ever made, because I learned about something called filet mignon and other finer foods. Right? I learned about the other and better things that could happen in life. It's the same thing here with our kids. If we don't introduce them to fine art and to the beauties of this world, they may not find it. So it's important for us to do this. Not just in that, but also for music. We just hired a new music teacher and a new art teacher, Adam Cordovo, and Matthew Conrad is teaching music. Because we want music to be a huge part of what we're doing here. We want the joyful noise that comes from people who take this gift of music and use it to the finest degree. There is an amazing, amazing, amazing amount of music that has been written of every variety, much like the art I just mentioned, and we can teach it to our kids. The incredible music that was sung in the monasteries of the past were sung by voices that our kids have. These kids' voices are just the same as those back then. We just got to train them, and we will. So let me recap. We're a storied institution. It's been around for a long time. The second last to be formed, but the successor of it all. We have a large base of support, but our most recent history has been a challenge to us. We know that the road to success is paved by continuing to build a premier faith-based educational system, first in the LA area, then in Maine and beyond. We are going to find ways to make it more affordable, more effective, and filled with the joy of the Lord. Each day the school opens, and as it has for the last 78 years, students enter. Most days I greet them at the Auburn campus with Mr. LaChapelle, and I know Mrs. Stevenson and her team greet them on the Lewiston campus. You see as they come in, actually it's really wonderful. On that campus, you see a bunch of, on the Lewiston campus, you see a bunch of really short, happy people run in. I have more or less awake people walk in, Roger and I sometimes play a guess at what drink the kids have, whether it's coffee or juice or, as they all come in staggering in. But they come in happy, and they greet us with a smile because they are glad to be here. By the way, if you want to know some of the wonders that occur in this place on a daily basis, Mr. LaChapelle spent 40 years as a devil. But now he's a saint. Conversion can happen. What can we say? And he's done, by the way, a remarkably great job in the few months that he's been here. We're so thrilled to have him. Students in this school are encouraged to take leadership roles. They take a tremendous amount of leadership roles here. They are encouraged to be polite in manner and joyful. For school ought to be hard work, and it ought to be joyful. A school filled with joy is a mark of good things happening. The leadership that is necessary has come, and it is starting to make, as I mentioned, the differences in the lives of our kids. It's going to take a while to get everything to where we want it, and then to keep improving it. And we are cognizant of that, and we ask you to be understanding of that as we continually work to improve. We need to do this, though, in an era of communication where people feel free to comment and send us messages. So please, if you ever need to get in contact with me, the easiest way is to send it to president@stdomsmaine.org, which is easy enough found on our website. Please feel free to reach out to us to see how we can help to continue in this. St. Dom's must continue to be a fully functioning school, from quality care for our youngsters to challenging courses and experiences for our upper grades. Each step of the way needs to be well thought out, carefully planned, and means tested. Gone are the days of doing things that we always did because we did them that way, or not doing things because we never did them way. Tradition, the essence, the spirit of St. Dom's must never be left behind. The family that we are, the kindness toward others, the fierceness of competition must ever be kept. The charity we have towards others must ever remain. But we are saints, and it is always good to be a saint. Thank you.